In this podcast episode, I catch up with Kate Hicks of Birth Trauma Aotearoa, a timely episode during Birth Trauma Awareness Week, which is running from July the 14th to the 20th. I last spoke with Kate around 2.5 years ago, so Kate will update us on the mahi they've done over this time, as well as plans for the future, including launching in-person support, developing research in the Aotearoa context, and the continual push for birth trauma prevention and improved support. Kate will also tell us about Birth Trauma Awareness Week, this year's theme, what the week aims to achieve, and how you might like to get involved. Enjoy. Welcome back to the podcast, Kate. It's been, I think, almost 2.5 years since you last came on and chatted with me about establishing Birth Trauma Aotearoa Trust, and I want to hear about what you've been up to, remind our listeners what the Birth Trauma Aotearoa Trust is all about and what you do.
Kia ora, good morning, and thanks for having me along. It's really nice to be back here chatting with you. And please excuse the frog in my throat. I've got a bit of a winter cold, so hopefully I don't kind of cough too much through our corridor this morning. But yeah, super lovely to be back with you. Do you want me to start off by just kind of reminding people who we are and what we do?
Yes, please. That'd be wonderful.
Also, Birth Trauma Aotearoa, we've been officially around, I guess, officially a ticked off charitable trust for about 3 years now. So about 2022, we got registered with Charity Services. Personally, I've been working in the birth trauma space for around 9 years, but in kind of the official capacity of creating and then leading Birth Trauma Aotearoa, we've only been around for about 3. So as I say, it's just me. I'm the only kind of worker bee or main worker bee. We've got a couple of volunteers who do some project-specific support for us, which is wonderful. And then we have a board of trustees. So there's 6 trustees who help to guide our mahi. And they've got an incredible array of kind of backgrounds and expertise, which covers medical ethics and health justice, research, NGO management, kaupapa Māori, maternal mental health programming in Māori maternities. So we've got a really wonderful array of kind of folk that guide this work. And I'm just in the process of setting up an advisory group as well. So that includes an obstetrician, a health specific kind of lawyer, so someone who their speciality is around health law, as well as a GP and looking for a psychologist. And we also have a pelvic health physio on there too. So we've got lots of different perspectives that can feed into our mahi if need be. What else? We're entirely voluntary driven, so everybody involved is involved because they believe in the kaupapa. It's not exactly a lucrative place to be in as a charity these days in Aotearoa, but at present, yeah, everybody is volunteer. And we're consumer focused, so while we acknowledge that others within a birthing experience may be traumatized by what unfolds, for example, midwives and so on, our work focuses on representing and working for the birthing parent and their wider whānau. So we're consumer focused in our work, and that work includes education, advocacy, research, and support service kind of provision. Yeah, that's kind of us in a nutshell. Yeah.
So talk me through some of the things that Birth Trauma Aotearoa have achieved or worked on in the years that you've been set up over these past 3 years.
Yeah, and it's, looking back to when we last spoke, I find it really hard to kind of quantify a lot of what we've done, because a lot of what we've done in the last few years has been relationships based, which is a really core component of our work. We really believe in, not going in with kind of burning torches to burn the health system down. That's not our kaupapa at all. Our kaupapa is very much relationships based. So building relationships across the maternity sector, as well as the charities sector. So, those charities and not-for-profits that are working in the maternity space across New Zealand. So building those relationships so that we can work together and we can work effectively in those spaces. But that's quite hard to quantify, right? Like I often get with registered charitable trusts have to complete a report at the end of each year, and I kind of get to the end of the year and go, no, what have I actually done? how do I put that down on paper? But because a lot of it is that relationship, but which is critical. So I think I look back and over 2024, for example, I think we had almost 70 kind of new connections or meetings with people, which doesn't sound like a huge number, but actually when it's one person working part-time, that's a pretty awesome achievement. And as I say, that's across across the charity sector. So other groups such as perinatal anxiety and depression Aotearoa, so working quite closely with them because there's a lot of overlap with our mahi Little Miracles Trust, which is a NICU and SCABU specific organisation. So working quite closely with them. And then as well as that, networks across the maternity sector. So some of those bigger organisations that work in the sector like RANZCOG. So developing those relationships so that that relationship is there so that when needed and when appropriate, we can share understandings and offer ideas and share resources and so on. An example of that would be one of our board members whose background is in medical ethics, and she's very, very informed when it comes to kind of medical ethics and informed consent. So her and I put a piece together that was published in RANZCOG, so that's the Royal Australia New Zealand College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists. So RANZCOG is much easier. So we had that piece, which was all about informed consent from a consumer perspective and from a medical ethics perspective. That piece was published in the RANZCOG magazine. So it doesn't, looking at it, it's like, okay, well, that's one piece of writing that we've got out there. But actually, when you think about the impact, the potential impact of that writing, getting in front of the obstetrician gynecologist kind of profession, that can be quite impactful, actually.
Have you had any feedback about that at all, Kate?
Not directly, no. I've talked to a few people who've said, oh yeah, I saw that and it was really great, but haven't heard back from the profession specifically. But I don't expect to, but we're certainly still going to kind of offer those kinds of insights. So a lot of our work over the last few years has been in that establishing ourselves as an organisation and kind of getting our organisational ducks in a row. A big part of that for us, one of our key po with our mahi is Te Tiriti o Watangi. So we've done a bit of a lot of work as an organisation, as a board, and as myself, looking at how we honour that within our organisation and in our work. So a lot of that kind of organisational work, if you like, as well as that we've done, our work has kind of leaned quite heavily into advocacy over the last few years. And that's really because there's been the opportunity there. So a lot of things have popped up which we felt we needed to kind of contribute towards. And that's advocacy from the level of, national government advocacy. So, for example, writing submissions. An example is around ACC's birth injury scheme. So we were quite involved in the campaigning in the lead up to that scheme. And then we're advising ACC on the scheme planning and rollout. And then once the scheme started, that work has continued, hey. So advising ACC on some of the kind of the teething issues around the scheme. And then also, even though we've stepped away from the advisory role directly with ACC, we'll still be doing a lot of work ourselves around promoting the scheme, sharing accurate information around it, doing media pieces, that kind of thing, to ensure that birthing mama and whānau have accurate information around what their entitlements are, whether they're eligible to apply, and so on. So yeah, there's been a lot of kind of advocacy and media that we've done around that. The advocacy work, as I say, has been at kind of the government level, but also across other organisations. For example, the Health and Disability Commissioner had a review that they did, so we contributed towards that. There's a national bereavement pathway that's been developed at the moment, so contributing towards that kind of thing. And really with that kind of advocacy work, my main focus has always been birth trauma. So broadly maternal mental health and maternal wellbeing, but as a specific issue, a specific experience, a specific cause and impact, birth trauma, whether that's physical or psychological. So yeah, that's kept me quite busy, is the advocacy side of things. And that, I mean, that in itself, I think the advocacy work could be a whole full-time job for a person. There's just so many opportunities for that advocacy. More recently, we've done a bunch around the 3-day postnatal stay bill, because we saw a lot of challenges with that bill as it was presented initially. So we're quite involved with the campaigning around that. So yeah, that's the advocacy.
Do you want to share with us what issues you saw with the bill as it was originally presented?
Yeah, it was tricky because, you know, generally we absolutely would support longer postnatal stays, like without a doubt. Hey, you cannot go wrong. Well, no, I won't say you can't go wrong with it, but as a concept, longer postnatal stays, fantastic. Our concerns were around the extra pressure that longer stay would put on an already incredibly stretched system. And as well as that, again, from a birth trauma specific view, we know that a lot of birth trauma relates to the postnatal stay and relates to negative interactions with healthcare staff during that stay, or the impacts of that incredibly stretched maternity system. Because that is always going to flow back onto whānau, right, and the care that they receive.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, those were kind of some of our main concerns. So we were really pushing for, in our advocacy around that, we were really pushing for improved resourcing for the maternity sector, and that's across all of our advocacy, right? Like not just the postnatal stay bill. So improved resourcing, certainly improved birth trauma and trauma-informed training across the sector, so that, for example, when mama is in her postnatal stay, the staff that are caring for her and interacting with her baby and her whānau are trauma-informed and are specifically birth trauma-informed.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was kind of some of the main ones for us, was really around that resourcing the sector and ensuring that it's we're preventing as much birth trauma related to the postnatal stay as we possibly can. Yeah.
Mm.
And also, sorry, just one more thing, I guess, critically, and a lot of those who submitted against the postnatal stay or towards the postnatal stay bill, were saying that, you know, the bill was, a lot of the narrative around the bill was around improving supports for whānau and connecting whānau, having that extended stay being an improved opportunity to connect whānau with supports and resources and services and so on. But what we know is that those services are incredibly stretched and lacking, and actually to have the most impact, we need to have access to those services, not just in the 3 days, you know, post-birth, if you're in the hospital, but actually whānau need easy access to those services within the first year, if not 5 years of baby's life. So many whānau want to leave, if they've experienced birth trauma particularly, they want to leave hospital as fast as they can. So how are we going to ensure that those whānau have access to those supports if this bill is really about improving wellbeing for whānau. So that was some of the key stuff that we kind of pushed forward. With that bill.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. If this is genuinely around wanting more support for whānau, and postnatally, then what does that practically look like if our services are already stretched? And I mean, I'm hearing many accounts of women who have been referred to maternal mental health services after a traumatic birth experience, and they are waiting for many weeks, sometimes months, to hear a response from those services. Just as one example of how stretched, under-resourced, underfunded our maternal mental health services are.
And we also hear, reports of healthcare providers, kind of those frontline service providers, for example, plunket nurses or GPs, just simply not putting in a referral because they know it's going to be declined. And that is deeply problematic. Like that is, we have a mama who is distressed for whatever reason or physically unwell, but they're not even being referred to services because providers know that those services are not there. Then that is a big chink in the chain that is broken.
100%.
Yeah. And so a lot of our work, over the last few years has been, that advocacy work at the government level within the sector, but also we've done a lot of media to really get those messages out there to support the wider charity sector to say, if we want well communities, then we need well whānau. If we want well whānau, then we need well mama and birthing parent. And that cannot be underestimated. So, and again, from our, when we're doing that work from our perspective, we're looking at it from a birth trauma kind of perspective or position. So, yeah, it's been busy, and I guess one of the great things is that there's been a lot of uptake. There's been an appetite for organisations and individuals and DHBs and so on to really understand birth trauma and to kind of gather our ideas and insights and feedback on things. For example, we've got a DHB who got in touch and said, hey, look, we're wanting to develop our own birth trauma resource to give to whānau. That's a locally specific kind of resource. Can you give us some feedback on that and just let us know what you think or what needs adding or and so on. So there's a real kind of desire to know birth trauma out there. There's a real desire to understand it, I think, from many sectors. There's a whole bunch that are not quite ready yet, and we're kind of working on those. But it's a slow process, and it's something that I need to constantly remind myself that it's a slow burn. This work is predominantly about attitudes and cultures, like birthplace cultures, really, and to change that can take generations. So some other parts are fast, and I think COVID really showed us that if we want change, then we can actually do that pretty jolly quickly. But yeah, a lot of what we're dealing with, and you all know this, is around attitudes and kind of societal understandings and so on, and what we value as cultures.
Anything else you want to add to what you've been up to? Because you mentioned advocacy, research. What's happening on that front?
Yeah, so I've been wanting to kind of get a good piece of research done in Aotearoa, that a robust piece of research that gives us a really clear understanding about birth in New Zealand and birth experience in New Zealand. And I think we've found it. There's a piece of research called the BEST study, or the Birth Experience Study, which was developed in Australia and is now being run in about 13 different countries around the world. So I chatted with the research creators, and we're looking at rolling that out here in New Zealand. pulled together a small research team, and at the moment we're really kind of drilling down into the other research that's out there that's available across New Zealand, and whether or how the best study will really kind of inform us, and whether it will fill gaps and so on. So that, we're not kind of reinventing the wheel, because that's not wise. It's never wise, right? So yeah, really looking at whether the best study is going to add value to our understandings here in New Zealand. As well as that, often getting researchers get in touch with me saying, well, I'm thinking about, doing this project, what do you think? Or, is there something I can add to do this here? Or can you kind of share my research project, because I'm looking for participants? So there's an increasing amount of research on birth trauma being done, which is fantastic. So we're just trying to support that as much as we can. Education is the other thing that we've done quite a bit of over the last few years, and that's everywhere from kind of, as I say, media through to things like webinars and in-person talks and so on, and live chats. So one interesting one that I did recently with one of our board members, so the board member who has a background in medical ethics, she works at Aotearoa Medical School. So we had a session with the teachers and the professors who teach medical ethics at Aotearoa Medical School. So I was kind of offering the consumer perspective around birth trauma, kind of what birth trauma is and so on. And then Angela offered kind of the academic view of birth trauma. Excuse me. So that was fantastic, because I think teaching the teachers about the specifics of birth trauma and the experience of birth trauma and the impact and the causes and so on is really, really kind of valuable. So that kind of thing. Live chats, did a live chat with Plunkett, have done a few in-person kind of workshops and so on to really, as I say, really share the specific insights and understandings and experiences around birth trauma and what that can mean for whānau. And one thing that kind of sticks in my mind is I did a workshop at the start of the year, and it was really well received. And this workshop was for an organisation that supports whānau kind of day to day, and it's run, or I guess the organisation is based in a building that is near to the hospital, and the hospital has the same soap in their bathroom that is in the hospital. Sorry, did I say the hospital? The organisation in their bathroom, they use the same soap as the hospital. And what came out of this workshop was that the smell of that soap was incredibly triggering to some of their staff who had experienced tricky birth situations. And I had, through my kind of workshop talk and PowerPoint and so on, I had talked about triggering and what happens in our brain and what can be triggering smells, sounds, and so on. So one of the kind of immediate actions to come out of that website, out of that workshop, was for them to change their soap. So it didn't smell like hospital soap. And I often think about that, because I can do kind of all this advocacy in the world and government submissions and so on, but actually that's a real tangible kind of change that will impact family hugely, because then families can go into this support service and not be put on edge instantly because of a smell. So I guess the breadth of the work that we're undertaking is quite huge, from kind of high level government kind of advocacy and campaigning through to working with organisations and improving understanding about birth trauma and the experience and the impact of birth trauma, kind of on a almost an individual level. It's awesome. And I guess the other thing that we've got planned is around our support services. So, for a long time, our only support offering in New Zealand has been, or from us at least, has been the My Birth Story website. which, I created way back when. And the idea behind that was to connect whānau with existing services. But what I have seen again and again and again over the years is that those, as you say, those services are so stretched, and whānau are often getting declined or re-referred or what have you. So we've been looking at how we can set up our own birth trauma specific services to offer them to whānau across New Zealand. So we've got a pilot support session which we have all planned out, but we're just looking at funding and where we can access funding to deliver that. And then the idea of the pilot support session is not only to offer that service to that local community, but also to learn as much as we can from that about what works, what doesn't, and so on, and then look to run it in other places around the country. And potentially really focusing on rural locations, because for rural whānau, it's so hard to get to support services, and options are so much more limited. That to be able to offer that for rural families would be fantastic.
So this would be delivered in person?
Yes, yeah. So there's a real kind of I deliberate quite a lot, around whether we go for online kind of support services first, because that's relatively cost, there's kind of low costs associated with that. But then we know the value of in-person connection and support and relationship building between families. So but then the in-person supports, there's so much more kind of resourcing that needs to go into those. So well, ideally, if I won lotto tomorrow, we'd offer both, right? But at the moment we're just focusing on that in-person support because of the value of those person-to-person connections and peer-to-peer support.
Is there any mahi that Birth Trauma Aotearoa are doing around educating? So there is, because you talked already about writing the article for RANZCOG, the RANZCOG magazine around informed consent in the birth space and medical ethics associated with that. But I just think back to when I trained to be a midwife, and I don't imagine it's changed a whole lot, is that we didn't learn a thing about birth trauma. And it would be nice to think that that was being introduced into the training of those who are, the obstetricians and the midwives who are at these births, who are guiding these whānau's experience of birth, and who can make such an incredible difference as to whether a difficult birth is a traumatic birth or a difficult birth is an empowering or positive birth experience.
Absolutely, yeah. So that's another area of our work is around education. So not only giving talks and webinar, for example, but which we've done kind of the odd thing up until now, but what I'm wanting to focus on what I am focusing on at the moment is creating specific education resources, a bunch for whānau. So a lot of what we already see on the My Birth Story website. So kind of what is birth trauma, how might it show up for you, what are some of the things you can do, and so on. But certainly a bunch of resources for healthcare professionals. So again, around informed consent, what is birth trauma and why healthcare professionals need to consider it and be mindful of it and actively prevent it, how they can actively kind of prevent birth trauma from occurring, and what to do when it occurs. So that's absolutely on our radar, and I've got lots of ideas. Again, for us it's around resourcing, so I know exactly what I kind of want to create, but we need to find the resources to put those together. So, and what our plans are so far is to have written resources so that they would be available from our website and shared among networks, but also to improve accessibility for whānau, but also for healthcare practitioners, because they are busy, right? Like they are so stretched already in terms of time and capacity. So having something like a video or an animated video to accompany that, so that we can get the key messages across really easily, and so that they're very accessible for people to access.
Yeah, I think it would be amazing to have, yes, like I said, this incorporated into the training of maternity care providers. But even as I say it, I sort of think the situation is so dire in terms of, us having such a staffing issue with regards to midwives. I'm not sure about doctors, about obstetrics, but the midwifery shortage in New Zealand has been a problem for a very long time, and it's the simple, fence building at the top of the cliff stuff, rather than like, let's offer women longer postnatal stays in the hospital. Well, first of all, let's provide them with the opportunity to have one-on-one midwifery care from a known provider. And I'm hearing countless stories of women who are reaching out to midwives the moment they learn they're pregnant. 6 weeks, and they cannot find a midwife to take them on. So even the basics of what we know, that that one-to-one support, like that ongoing continuity of care provider throughout your pregnancy, birth, and postpartum, we know that impacts the degree of trust and safety that a woman and her family have going into their birth experience, and yet that's been sort of taken away in part by this shortage of midwives. Or when they can find a midwife, it's not like the good old days when we used to be able to interview a few different midwives and find somebody who's philosophically aligned, or so, and the midwives have got the crunch on them. Boy, I mean, a lot of them are probably taking on bigger caseloads than they're feeling comfortable with. They're probably accepting clients that aren't aligned for them, and that doesn't feel safe for them either, and they're not getting paid enough, that they're not getting enough support. So then how can they provide a trauma-informed service if they themselves are feeling traumatized through the expectations put on them in a role that is like midwifery? She's a tough gig, right? Being on call 24/7, being responsible for lives, it's a big ask. And why are we not supporting those at the coalface more, so that we're preventing a lot of this birth trauma from taking place in the first place? It's so frustrating.
Yeah, and that's really just what you said has been a real kind of driver for a lot of our advocacy work to date, is knowing the impact of what those maternity systems, what they can do for whānau or not do for whānau, and how they can either be a protective factor and prevent birth trauma from occurring, or if they're not up to scratch for whatever reason, systems and so on, then they can really be a causing factor, like so that's really why a lot of our work to date has been around advocacy, to try and get that understanding out there into communities, into policymakers, to MPs, out through media and so on. Because, as you know, birth trauma as a concept is reasonably new. Like we've really only had a name. It's been happening for decades and decades. But actually having a name for it is reasonably new. So getting that name out there, getting that kind of experience out there, and the causes of it and the impacts of it has been a real focus of our work. So that ideally, those who can influence systems and resourcing and so on can go, right, if that's a problem, then we need to change some things to be the fence at the top of the cliff, as opposed to having to be the ambulance at the bottom. And then, it's tricky because you've got so many factors influence policy and systems and so on. So, yeah, I mean, as I say, that could be a full-time job. Is that?
Yeah.
So
Kate, clearly resourcing, finances, staffing are struggles for birth trauma Aotearoa to be able to do the work that we know needs doing in this sector. But share with us what perhaps has been something that's been surprising for you since you started this work.
Probably the speed at which we've kind of grown. I can't, when I set up Birth Trauma Aotearoa, I thought, well, it's going to take us a good long while to kind of get ourselves out there and kind of known in the sector and so on, and to be able to influence. But that's happened a lot faster than I thought it would, which is great because it really shows, as I say earlier, it really shows the appetite for organisations and individuals and even government departments sometimes to really have those understandings and to really know about birth trauma and what those protective factors, the prevention side of birth trauma is, and what can be done following trauma. So that's probably the thing that surprised me the most is how fast we've kind of grown. At the same time, we need to be a little bit mindful of that because we don't want to get too big too quick, I suppose, and then kind of not be able to manage what we're into. And I need to check myself a little bit at the same time because I can see where all the solutions, well, not all the solutions maybe, but a lot of the solutions lie. And I talk with and listen to lots of other people who've got other ideas about where the solutions are as well. So it's really easy to go, okay, we need to do this thing and this thing and that thing and that thing there. But actually that's not wise necessarily. It can oftentimes it's better to go, okay, we're going to pick those two things and smash them out and get them done really well. And then we're going to move on to the other two things. And the challenge for me personally, I think, is I'm often thinking kind of and yet, like I think you mentioned and yet earlier, I was like, yeah, me too, because, while I'm doing these two things over here and doing them well, potentially, yet there's, at the same time, there's still this birth trauma occurring and there's still a lack of services, and that feels really, I'm not sure of the right word, but it feels really tricky because I want it all fixed and I want it all fixed yesterday. And I know that's not realistic, but it certainly helps with the drive to keep on ticking. Yeah, even with limited staff resourcing and even with limited financial resourcing, because we know the impacts, and we know the impacts of birth trauma, but also we know what life for mama, for birthing parent, and for whānau and our wider community could be like if we have a lot of protective factors around birth trauma, a lot of prevention work going on. We know what it can be like if we have, support services following trauma that are equitable, that are culturally safe, that are trauma informed, that are accessible, all of those things. We know that. So just gotta get there.
Yeah, one step at a time, right? Lay down those foundations so that the structure that's built from there is a lasting one, is a functional one. But that's tough when you've got this vision of what needs to happen, and and it takes time and resourcing that isn't freely available.
Yeah.
So what is on the horizon for Birth Trauma Aotearoa?
Education resources is really something that we're focusing on now. I mean, I've got a lot of toes and a lot of pies at the moment. So I'm carving out some space to really kind of focus on the education resources is my intention for the second half of this year. And that will take, the form that I mentioned earlier, so the written resources and some kind of video or animation and so on. But as well as that, expanding that out to include practitioner training at some point. And that will probably be a few years down the track, but that's kind of the path that's the pathway that we're kind of on. That's where we want to get to eventually, because that's a real protective factor, right, for birth trauma, is practitioner understanding and trauma-informed care. Advocacy work will continue, though we're going to step back from that a little bit just to really focus on the education resources and the support services. So I mentioned earlier, we've got a pilot support program that we're looking to run, and then kind of expanding that out to other areas around the country. Or, if we learn from that pilot support project that actually that's not the best way to deliver it and we need to revisit that, go back to the drawing board, then we'll do that. And gosh, awareness raising, that is just continuous, right? Like I mentioned earlier about kind of getting the concept and the understandings around birth trauma out there into the world, and that is kind of ongoing. Excuse me. And then research, I talked about the BEST project, so that's we'll see where that lands. If myself and the research team really believe that it's going to be valuable to run that project here as well, then we'll get into running that. And it's interesting, isn't it, because we can do all the academic research in the world, but actually a lot of the things that I feel like will come up and do come up in research, we already know through lived experience and anecdotal evidence. And while lived experience is kind of gaining more respect and more validity, and it's being presented more and more and respected more and more, people still like to have data, and they still like to have research-backed information. So really creating something that can be used in that case is what we're looking for there. Yeah. And then another key piece of work I've got, it's just in the early stages at the moment, but it's in response to something that I think happens a lot, which is where mama or birthing parent might present at maybe a GP clinic, or they might be having a session with their blanket nurse, and birth just isn't really asked about. And I think, excuse me, I think it is more and more, but we don't have any specific kind of scale or screening tool that's specific to birth trauma. That a GP, for example, can just whip out and go, here's 5 questions that I can ask you, and we can look at whether your birth experience is leading to your distress now. Often I think because postnatal depression and postnatal anxiety are understood so much more within primary services, primary health services, we kind of instantly go there, but
Mm-hmm.
and very seldom, more and more, but still pretty seldom is birth experience considered. So I'm looking at there's a what's called the birth trauma scale, which was developed in the UK. That is exactly that. It's 5 questions which relate to the DSM-5, so that's kind of the official diagnosis for post-traumatic stress. So the 5 questions that the UK scale has are based on that diagnosis for post-traumatic stress. That's not to say that someone has to be at post-traumatic stress level for the scale to be valuable, but essentially these 5 questions could be used by a GP or a Plunkett nurse to assess whether birth experience contributed to a mama or birthing parents and non-birthing parents experience of distress.
Yeah.
So, and my intention with that is to get that scale into New Zealand, check whether it's kind of appropriate for use here, and then get it out to healthcare practitioners, those consumer-facing healthcare practitioners, so that if someone presents with distress, those practitioners aren't just reaching for the Edinburgh depression scale or an anxiety scale. They're also reaching for a birth trauma scale to go, okay, let's get an appropriate diagnosis for you. Let's get an appropriate understanding of where your distress has come from, so we can therefore appropriately support you and, if need be, look at treatment.
Yeah, and that's where I go, but then what, So yes, she definitely has birth-related trauma, birth trauma, and now what? Where do we send her? And yeah, so that's tricky. But I love this, this idea, this incorporating this, because I think so many women and whānau out there are unaware of that what they went through is feasibly called birth trauma, that what they went through and how they're feeling in the wake of their birth experience isn't just normal. This isn't just how it is, and so they're not kind of holding on to all these feelings of anxiety and perhaps, fear, hypervigilance, grief, whatever it is that they're carrying into this precious postpartum time. But they are recognizing, okay, so this isn't just how it is, and there is, I am worthy of support. I'm worthy of help, and
totally. And it's almost that validation, really. Hey, a big part of it is really, if your doctor is saying, oh yeah, this, we've done these 5 questions, or we've had a bit of a kōrero about your birth experience and how you feel about it now, that's entirely feasible. That this is what was, that birth experience is what is causing your distress right now. And for a lot of people, they need that very clear kind of link. I was the same, and that's why I created the My Birth Story website, because I had a healthy baby at the end of it, and everyone's like, oh well, that's the most important thing, right, is that baby's healthy, and yet was still feeling really wobbly, and so needed that link to go, oh yeah, okay, that was what that really tricky time was what is causing the distress now. And if the more tools I think that we have in our basket to say, to make that connection, so that mama and whānau can go, right, it was that is causing my distress. It's entirely reasonable to have this response. It's entirely normal for my nervous system to be having that response. It's really valid. So now what can I do to kind of help support myself and my whānau? As you say, at the same time, advocating for improved services. And as I said earlier, that's always a tension, right, within our work is, do we put our capacity, my time and energy into the services, the support services, and advocating for that, or even creating our own, or do we look at, assessment scales and so on? So yeah, lots of balls in the air.
Lots of balls. We've got Birth Trauma Awareness Week coming up very soon. It's July 14th to the 20th.
You got it. Yeah.
What are Birth Trauma Aotearoa doing around Birth Trauma Awareness Week, and what would you like the listeners to know?
Sure. So as you say, it's from July 14 to 20. And this year we've teamed up with Birth Trauma Australia, and we're sharing the theme of This is Birth. And essentially, This is Birth acknowledges and honours and respects the diversity of birth. So what they're finding in Australia, and what we see here a lot as well, is that there's kind of this idea that there's this one size fits all for birth, right? That there's a right way to birth and a wrong way to birth. And what This is Birth is really saying is that's not the case. So there's such a diversity of how birth can unfold, and there's such a diversity of choices that whānau can make. And there is no right way or wrong way. There's just the right way for you and your whānau. So that's the theme. And that's what we're really going to encourage people to think about and consider and, talk about over Awareness Week and beyond. The most important thing, I think, is really recognizing and remembering that, there's no right or wrong. How we birth isn't necessarily, there's certainly no right or wrong with how you birth, right? Whether it's home birth, water birth, C-section, repeat C-section, VBAC, like all of those are okay. The important thing is that whānau feel and are safe, that they're respected, that they have autonomy, that they're informed and can make choices, that they can give informed consent and all that good stuff. So that's really what This is Birth is about. And over the week, we'll be sharing information and some birth stories to kind of highlight that as well. The other thing that we run over Awareness Week is what's called our 50 for 50 campaign. And that's in its third year now, I think. And 50 for 50 came from me continually sharing a statistic, whether I was doing media, or giving a talk or talking to MPs or what have you. The statistic is, as you know, research tells us that 1/3, so 1 in 3 birthing parents will consider their birth emotionally traumatizing. And in Aotearoa, that equates to 50 mama a day coming out of birth feeling emotionally traumatized. And I'd share the statistic with, whoever, and my heart would drop every time I shared that number, because it just is a huge number in my mind. So the 50 for 50 campaign is really around acknowledging that number and showing the birth trauma community, the growing birth trauma community, that we see you, we believe you, and we know that you deserve support. So 50 for 50 invites the birth trauma community, but more importantly, those outside of the birth trauma community. It invites people to do 50 of something over Awareness Week as a way to acknowledge and honour and send respect and aroha towards New Zealand's birth trauma community. So it's quite a fun campaign, actually, because in the past we've had all kinds of things that people have done in the past. Last year we had someone offer 50 hugs to different people, and it was wonderful because she emailed us and she said, well, I'm actually quite a kind of introverted person, like this is quite a big deal for me. So she sent me all these photographs. She sent about 12 photographs of her hugging work colleagues and friends and family. It was wonderful. We've had people do 50 lunges, which I just think of your legs burning, after that, people have planted 50 seeds. People have done 50, big breaths, mindful breaths. People have cycled 50 kilometers. So there's a real kind of array of things that people have done over the week. Some are quite kind of big and out there and loud. Some are really kind of quiet and private. And there's a lot, that people can do. And we encourage people to do things which are special to them or kind of meaningful for them. And it doesn't have to cost, money. One thing we recommend is pushing your child 50 times on the swing, if you're at the park with them. So the key thing is 50 in order to acknowledge and kind of send respect and aroha to the birthing community.
Yeah. Is this a fundraising campaign too, Kate? Are you hoping that people will get sponsored for their 50 whatevers, and that those funds can go towards birth trauma Aotearoa?
I mean, we certainly greatly appreciate funds that can be raised for us, and any funds that are raised this year will go towards creating those education resources for healthcare practitioners. So last year funds went towards education resources, and the year before funds went towards the pilot support program that we're looking to run. This year's funds created will go towards those healthcare practitioner resources. And people can find our bank account details on our website, which is birthtraumaaotearoa.org.nz. Certainly welcome donations and funds, but really it's about awareness raising. And when someone comes up to you and says, hey, I'm part of this campaign called 50 for 50 and I'm offering 50 hugs, would you like one? Then having a hug and then having a kōrero about what's 50 about and what are you up to and what's this all about. So awareness raising kind of is the key, but certainly funds are welcome too.
And if anybody's listening to this podcast episode and they're wanting to potentially get involved in helping with what Birth Trauma Aotearoa is all about outside of the 50 for 50, what would you suggest?
Yeah, we totally welcome volunteer support. What we find really valuable with volunteer support is a real kind of commitment to a project. So I could give someone a project and say, here's kind of the gist of it, and you can take it and lead it, and we'll have regular check-ins, and I can support you with whatever, whatever you need. And so we're always welcome to having conversations. Welcome having conversations with people who might have some time and space to be able to contribute towards a project. And even as much as just kind of sharing our posts on social media and kind of spreading the word that way, like that is so valuable. Hey, and spreading understandings, spreading the kaupapa, and just raising awareness is pretty awesome too.
Yeah, and if anybody has some spare cash or knows some good funding pools that might be interested in supporting Birth Trauma Aotearoa, send them Kate's way.
Yeah, anyone's won lotto lately, just thing out.
Yeah. It's such a shame that when finances get in the way of just such crucially vital work, like the work that you're doing at Birth Trauma Aotearoa, Kate.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can do a lot on very little, but really, if we want to scale up what we're doing, particularly around support services and education resources and so on, we can do a certain level, I guess, with very little resourcing. But actually, to make a greater impact, we need to scale up, So, and that's where the resources comes in. So, but we'll get there. We'll just tick away until we get there.
Any last words you want to share before we close off this interview?
No, I think, you know, as always, like if there's mama listening or other whānau members listening, if you've had a tricky time, whether it's, you know, with physical injury or psychological trauma, and when I say trauma, I mean right from feeling a little bit confused or wobbly right through to kind of feeling extremely distressed. You're deserving of support, and what you're feeling is totally valid and totally understandable, and you deserve to find that support and care. Yeah.
Yeah, and to reach out for help. So
Mm.
I'll have the links in the show notes, but birthtrauma.aotearoa.org.
.org.nz. Yep, and that on our page that explains about our mahi, but also links through to our support resource, which is the My Birth Story website. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thanks, Kate. Thank you for the work that you continue to do. You put in so much heart and energy and just love, really, into this mahi, and it's certainly very valuable. So appreciate
Sure.
you so much.
Thanks, Carla. Thanks for having me along again, especially with my croaky voice. And yeah, thanks for your continuing support too.